after 11 o'clock, and this will be one vote right after another in what we call vote-a-rama. Obviously, I would wait until our ranking member got here, but in view of the fact that we are so constrained and both Kay and John are on their way, and so let me just say good morning and thank you all for being here. This hearing is timely in the risk, opportunities, and oversight of commercial space, considering the fact that SpaceX has had the success that they have, and by the end of the year, we expect to see Orbital Sciences launching with cargo to the space station as well. And so it's a time to step back and take a look at what's going on in the whole venture of commercial space, what we've learned, what the current issues are. John, I was saying I was killing time so that we can get right on in it. And all of us, all of us have, if it's okay with you, that we'll just dispense with the opening statements. Now, what I'd like you to do so we can get in everybody and that we can get in questions, I want each of you to confine your remarks to about 5 minutes. And then we'll get into it and elaborate on your remarks with regard to our questions. So let me just say, star-studded panel, Bill Gerstenmaier, the Associate Administrator, is going to talk about NASA's perspective on commercial space. Dr. Dillingham from GAO, who's going to speak on some of the work GAO has done regarding commercial space, and in particular, a recent study that GAO has done. And then we have 2 space shuttle astronauts. It turns out that they actually flew together on STS-92, Colonel Pam Melroy and Captain Michael Lopez-Alegria. And Pam is here representing the FAA, and Michael is here on his newly appointed being president of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. You can keep all that crowd together, you're Merlin the magician. And we have Michael Gold from Bigelow, and they are developing space habitats. And so thank you all for being here. And with that, we'll start with you, Mr. Gerstenmaier.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for allowing me to represent the team that supports human spaceflight for NASA. I look forward to sharing my thoughts on the risks, opportunities, and oversight of commercial space. First, in order to accept a risk, there must be an opportunity or the risk is not warranted. The opportunity associated with commercial space is that it allows NASA to obtain a critical service for the International Space Station with reduced cost and oversight. And these two things, reduced cost and oversight, are allowing NASA to focus its talents on the bigger goals, utilization of the ISS, and developing the next generation of hardware and skills that will allow us to extend human presence into the solar system beyond low Earth orbit. In the past, NASA needed to work hand-in-hand with our contractors, not only ensuring the requirements were being met, but also helping to design and build the systems needed for low Earth orbit. The hardware and systems needed for low Earth orbit simply did not exist. Today, that story is very different. There are avionics systems, hardware systems, manufacturing tools, and techniques readily available for use in low Earth orbit. The ISS has developed the techniques needed for sustained human presence with reasonable risk in low Earth orbit. However, the highly reliable and maintainable systems necessary for beyond low Earth orbit do not yet exist, and NASA is focused on developing these systems. The ISS is being used to test and refine many of these systems needed for beyond low Earth orbit. The new challenge for NASA is to develop these new techniques and systems for beyond low Earth orbit. The challenge of operating days to months away from Earth is dramatically more difficult than just being hours away in low Earth orbit. In addition to preparing for human journeys beyond low Earth orbit, NASA must also use the ISS National Laboratory activity to expose commercial industry to the advantages of space-based research for terrestrial applications. If industry can see the direct benefits of space-based research for gaining new insight and competitive advantage for products and services that these companies are developing for use on the Earth, then these commercial companies will want to utilize space without government involvement. ISS is an avenue for companies to explore the benefits of space research at low risk and low cost. Commercial transportation will be critical to these companies using space for research. So NASA is embracing a new method of doing business for low Earth orbit that will enable a bigger future for human space exploration and allow use of the ISS to its fullest extent. Another risk associated with commercial space flight is assuming that transportation to and from low Earth orbit is easy. The technical challenges will be larger than initially anticipated by the companies. NASA will need to allow extra time for these services to materialize. NASA, with the support of the administration and Congress, correctly anticipated this risk by adding STS-135 to add extra margin for ISS cargo. We also need to be prepared for a failure or a problem during one of these missions. This is normal, and we will need to protect with adequate margin. Further, we cannot afford a major stand-down for a problem. We need to anticipate and not overreact to these problems. We should learn from these problems and continue moving forward without extensive external investigations. These problems will occur and should not be viewed as a major failure. Crew-related transportation, however, will require extra safety considerations beyond the safety requirements for cargo. Our NASA and industry teams have prepared for this handover to industry for years. Working with our international partners on ISS allowed NASA experience in working with equivalent standards. NASA needed to look at different ways of accomplishing tasks and protecting safety. The international partners also gave us experience in allowing the approach and berthing to ISS on the first flight of a new vehicle. The international partner experience gave us techniques that NASA is applying on the commercial cargo flights. The NASA team was fully ready for this transition to commercial cargo transportation. NASA is all about doing seemingly impossible tasks. NASA does this through preparedness and innovation. We are constantly looking for new ways to accomplish our tasks. Commercial spaceflight is just one of the many ways we are opening up exploration to new partners or finding different ways of working with our established partners. We will apply lessons learned from the commercial crew and cargo to SLS and MPCV. We will continue to challenge our perception of what is possible by expanding human presence beyond low Earth orbit while operating and expanding the benefits of space exploration to folks here on Earth. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerstenmaier. Kay, with your permission, we're going to dispense with the opening statements since we're racing the clock, and we will put everybody's opening statement in the record.
Perfect. I will submit it for the record and do want to hear from the witnesses and hope we have a chance also for questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Colonel Melroy.
Chairman Nelson, Ranking Member Boozman, and Senator Hutchison, thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. America recently witnessed a turning point in transportation to low Earth orbit when a domestic commercial company, SpaceX, launched its Falcon 9 rocket from Cape Canaveral. The Dragon capsule successfully berthed with the International Space Station and later safely re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, demonstrating the ability to deliver and return cargo for NASA. Both the launch and the re-entry of the SpaceX mission were licensed by the Federal Aviation Administration's Office of Commercial Space Transportation. The office was established in 1984 with a mission to ensure protection of the public during commercial launch and re-entry activities. I have spent the lion's share of my career in space operations, and I can assure you that even with a rigorous framework of safety measures, space transportation is not without risk. Therefore, the FAA requires operators to purchase insurance to cover the maximum probable loss that a launch or re-entry could cause to third parties and their property. By statute, claims by or against spaceflight participants are not covered by this insurance, since it is only for third-party damages. In the case of a very low probability event, with a likelihood of happening of less than 1 in 10 million, The second tier of the risk-sharing regime would result in the conditional U.S. government payment of third-party claims in excess of maximum probable loss insurance. After hearing that mouthful, you can understand why it's commonly referred to as indemnification. The government's liability exposure is capped at $1.5 billion adjusted for inflation, with payments subject to congressional appropriation. The U.S. government has never been called on to make a payment since indemnification became law in 1988. Congress has maintained the regime's functionality and effectiveness over the past 24 years by enacting 5 extensions. The FAA supports extending the indemnification provision for an additional 5 years. A stable regulatory environment, predictable risk-based financial responsibility requirements are critical to investor confidence and cost-effective business plans. In addition to financial risk allocation, planning is in place for how to respond in the event of an accident. The FAA, the National Transportation Safety Board, and the Air Force have a joint memorandum of agreement that calls out our roles and responsibilities in the event of a mishap investigation. We value this partnership, respect each other's expertise, and are confident that our many joint exercises and discussions have prepared us to work together effectively in the future. With regards to human spaceflight, by law, the FAA may not propose regulations for occupant safety until October of 2015. We anticipate that a comprehensive occupant safety regulatory framework will be a major undertaking and will involve significant public comment and input. NASA is planning to contract with the private sector to transport NASA astronauts to ISS, as you heard from Mr. Gerstenmaier. The FAA and NASA have signed an historic agreement addressing commercial space travel of astronauts to and from the ISS. We have agreed that FAA licensing for public safety will be required for operational flights to the ISS. Crew safety and mission assurance will remain NASA's responsibility. This approach allows us to integrate our areas of expertise and share lessons learned as progress is made. We are grateful to NASA for paving the way for commercial crew transportation and recognize that industry will benefit from our cooperation. As the industry evolves and the government's reliance on commercial vehicle increases, it may be necessary to revisit some of the statutes and regulations that govern commercial space transportation. We look forward to working with the interagency community and with Congress to ensure the domestic commercial space transportation industry will continue to create jobs, fuel innovation, and drive economic growth. Again, I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak before you today and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Colonel. Dr. Dillingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Boozman, Senator Hutchison, for inviting GAO to appear before you this morning. My testimony focuses on 4 aspects of the U.S. commercial space launch industry. First, the trends and forecasts in the industry. Second, the challenges that FAA faces in overseeing and promoting the industry. Third, some of the factors that Congress may want to consider as it determines the future of commercial space launch indemnification for third parties. And fourth, some of the challenges to U.S. global competitiveness as the industry grows and matures. With regard to the industry trends, as detailed in our written statement, the number of FAA-licensed orbital launches has been generally lower since a peak of 22 launches in 1998. Our work shows that despite the low number of launches in recent years, important commercial space flight research and development activities continue to take place. The number of commercial space launches is expected to increase in the years ahead as NASA begins procuring commercial cargo transportation services to the International Space Station, and private industry continues developing vehicles for space tourism. Additionally, private companies and state governments have been developing spaceports to accommodate the anticipated space tourism flights and expand the nation's launch capacity. With regard to the second area of our testimony, we have identified several challenges that FAA will need to address as it carries out its oversight responsibilities for a changing and maturing space launch industry. These challenges include ensuring that it has the proper mix of skills and personnel in place to effectively handle industry growth. FAA must also ensure that its regulations on licensing and safety requirements at federal launch sites for expendable vehicles will also be suitable for operations at commercial spaceports. The agency must also be mindful of potential conflicts of interest in overseeing the safety of commercial space launches while promoting the industry. And with the transformation of the nation's air traffic control system to next generation, FAA will need to accommodate spacecraft that are transitioning to and from space through the national airspace system. With regard to the factors that Congress may want to consider with regard to indemnification, our written statement discusses, first, the potential increased cost for the federal government of this risk-sharing regime as a result of the expected increase in manned commercial launches. Second, the federal government's potential exposure to liability as a result of FAA's process for calculating maximal probable loss. And third, the lack of federal indemnification coverage for on-orbit activities. We have also identified some factors that may have a negative impact on the U.S. global competitiveness. These factors include relatively high U.S. launch prices when compared to other countries such as China, Russia, and France, and the limitations on U.S. technology exports, which could affect launch company abilities to sell their services abroad. And finally, Mr. Chairman, there's also the fact that the commercial space launch industry operates without the benefit of a national strategy. The situation has resulted in multiple federal agencies having responsibilities for space activities, and most have developed their own strategies for meeting their responsibilities. A national strategy could identify and fill any gaps in federal policy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This concludes my oral statement. I'll be pleased to respond to any questions from you, the ranking member, or Senator Hutchison.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Gold.
I would like to thank you, Chairman Nelson, Ranking Member Boozman, and Senator Hutchison for this opportunity to testify. Also, since I don't get to do this every day, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge my fellow witness, Bill Gerstenmaier, whose steady hand and tireless quiet leadership has made him one of the most respected and admired leaders in the space industry today. Unlike Mr. Gerstenmaier, this is the first time a Bigelow Aerospace official has testified before Congress, and I therefore would like to begin with some background on our company. Bigelow Aerospace was founded in the spring of 1999 by Robert T. Bigelow, with a mission to revolutionize space commerce via the development and deployment of inflatable, or as we prefer to call them, expandable space habitats. Expandable habitats provide greater volumes than traditional metallic structures, as well as enhanced protection from radiation and physical debris. When NASA ran out of funding for their own inflatable habitat program more than a decade ago, Bigelow Aerospace picked up the torch and rescued this promising technology, which we will use to construct the world's first private sector space station. In order to prove and demonstrate our designs and capabilities, Bigelow Aerospace deployed two subscale prototype habitats, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, a scale model of which is to my left, and they were launched in 2006 and 2007 respectively, and I still can't believe I got it through security. These launches were conducted in Russia aboard a converted Russian nuclear missile and launched from an active Russian nuclear missile site. Having spent the better part of 3 years traveling back and forth to Siberia, I can assure you that we were not going there to enjoy the pleasant weather. Instead, Bigelow Aerospace was driven to Russia by one simple issue: price. At the right price, we believe there is a substantial business case for commercial human spaceflight activities. Specifically, Bigelow Aerospace is focusing on what we term sovereign clients, which are international space agencies, foreign governments, or companies that wish to enjoy the benefits of orbital human spaceflight services. Bigelow Aerospace is actively courting these sovereign entities to lease space aboard our first station, which will be comprised of 2 or more BA-330 habitats. Bigelow Aerospace is also a strong supporter of microgravity research and development. We've conducted extensive discussions with numerous public and private officials, both in the U.S. and abroad, and we believe there are real and substantial benefits that companies and countries can enjoy, particularly in the pharmaceutical and biotech sectors, by gaining access to orbital micrograv R&D facilities. However, to seize these opportunities, pricing must be kept under control. And in the aerospace world, prices are driven to a surprising degree by the laws and regulatory framework that hardware is developed and operates under. I would like to take this opportunity now to address a few of these critical issues. First and foremost, there has been a great deal of debate over the use of Space Act agreements versus the federal acquisition regulations. Recently, Congressman Wolf and Administrator Bolden reached an understanding that NASA would continue to use SAAs through CCI Cap and that future commercial crew procurements would be implemented under the auspices of the FAR. Such a strategy directly parallels the successful cargo programs of COTS and CRS, and wasn't just a compromise, but was always the right thing to do. And we applaud Congressman Wolf's and Administrator Bolden's efforts, which have only made the commercial crew program stronger. That being said, I would be remiss if I did not bring to the committee's attention what I believe to be a gross distortion of the law surrounding Space Act agreements. Specifically, a review of relevant agency policy directives and GAO decisions demonstrates that NASA can, in fact, mandate safety requirements under the auspices of an SAA. The current belief at NASA is that the government cannot enjoy direct benefits of any kind from a Space Act agreement, and that to levy safety requirements would therefore violate this inherent limitation. I believe that such an interpretation of the law is simply wrong. Per NASA's own policy directives, funded SAAs are to be used, and I quote, to accomplish an agency mission. Moreover, in reviewing this very issue, the GAO stated that SAAs can be used so long as the principal purpose of the program is to stimulate a commercial market from which both the private sector and the government can purchase services. These GAO decisions appear to actually encourage NASA to share requirements, since if the transportation systems are to eventually support government acquisitions, this would be impossible to accomplish without companies fully understanding and complying with the agency's mandatory safety needs. Because there are differing legal opinions on this topic, I would strongly encourage the committee to reach out to the ultimate arbiter of this issue, the GAO, for their advice and guidance. Of equal importance to how a system is procured is who regulates it. We at Bigelow Aerospace have always been staunch advocates for strong, common-sense safety practices. We believe that there is no better place for regulatory authority to reside than with the FAAST. Led by the very capable Dr. George Neild and supported by an exceptional staff, including my fellow witness and astronaut, Pam Melroy, the FAAST has experience in working with civil, commercial, and military launches, and thereby has an unparalleled broad swath of knowledge to draw upon. In stark contrast to the FAA, NASA is not a regulatory agency, and Administrator Bolden himself has made it publicly and explicitly clear that NASA should never become a regulatory agency. In order to enjoy the opportunity presented by commercial space, the risk of regulatory confusion must be eliminated as quickly as possible. Therefore, we hope that the committee will work with the FAA, NASA, and commercial space companies to firmly ensconce regulatory authority over commercial space activities with the FAA, since the AST is the only federal entity with the staff, capabilities, and background to effectively play this role. I hope this testimony has been helpful and look forward to answering any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Captain Lopez-Alegria.
Chairman Nelson, Ranking Member Boozman, and Senator Hutchison, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the exciting future of commercial spaceflight. Last month, Space Exploration Technologies launched the Dragon spacecraft atop its Falcon 9 rocket to the International Space Station, successfully completing the demonstration phase of its Commercial Orbital Transportation Services Agreement with NASA. For the first time since the Space Shuttle retired, the world watched as Americans accomplished a new achievement in space. With the shuttle orbiters headed for their final homes, Dragon showed us that America's leadership in space is alive and well, and that by partnering with commercial spaceflight companies, NASA continues to do great things. But recent success is not limited to SpaceX. While Dragon was birthed to the space station, Sierra Nevada Corporation conducted a captive carry test of its winged Dream Chaser vehicle for the first time. And United Launch Alliance, Blue Origin, and others in NASA's Commercial Crew Program are also making strong progress. We expect to see more exciting accomplishments in the months to come. Commercial Spaceflight Federation is the industry advocate for companies that are working to make commercial human spaceflight a reality. The CSF's members include spaceports, vehicle builders, service providers, robotic explorers, and suppliers that are building a web of commercial activity in space. The industry builds on two venerable American traditions, our entrepreneurial and inventive spirit, and our half-century of leadership in human spaceflight. In commercial spaceflight, as in any nascent high-tech industry, approaches to solve thorny problems vary greatly. Safety is paramount for all our members, and it is important to permit the industry to mature before allowing regulation to artificially limit technical approaches and, by extension, stifle innovation. To that end, we support the language in the Commercial Space Launch Amendments Act of 2004 that allows industries the space to rapidly innovate and adopt technical and safety improvements without the threat of regulation unless based on data from a serious safety incident, and we applaud the extension of this learning period to at least October 2015. Further, we support the extension of the FAA regime that shares third-party liability risk with launch providers required to purchase extensive insurance policies and the government stepping in above that level. Termination of this regime would require American launch providers to purchase greater amounts of insurance. Simply put, that expense will either be passed on to the customers, putting the U.S. providers at significant market disadvantage vis-a-vis their Russian, French, and Chinese competitors, or be absorbed, causing likely unsustainable reductions in revenue. Either scenario could well lead to their exit from the market and result in the federal government paying the full cost of maintaining the national defense-related launch industry base, not to mention the significant loss of high-tech American jobs. Having commanded the International Space Station, I share with this committee an understanding of its great value to America and indeed to the world, and I want to especially thank Senators Nelson and Hutchison for your tireless support over the many years. The ISS represents an unparalleled capability for space-based research and technology demonstration, but its full utilization potential is dependent on robust cargo and crew transportation. To this end, we support the highest possible funding for NASA's commercial crew program in fiscal year 13 and beyond to restore our national crew access, to bring NASA investment and high-tech jobs back to America, and to ensure that this gap in American human spaceflight capability ends soon and forever. Space is no longer exclusively the domain of professional astronauts. I launched on Soyuz in 2006 to the ISS with one spaceflight participant, and I landed 7 months later with another. In fact, every single available seat on the Soyuz has been sold with unfulfilled demand, even as the price has increased over the years. According to Space Adventures, the CSF company that brokered these flights, the market demand for similar voyages on American vehicle would be 5 to 10 times greater. As the CSF's members develop a U.S. commercial crew capability and plans for private on-orbit facilities progress, we expect this market to flourish. In the suborbital arena, many companies are competing to be the first to launch a reusable vehicle to space since Spaceship One. Spaceflight has the unique ability to inspire students, and suborbital commercial spaceflight will open space to a large population of young people, as prices for small experimental payloads to suborbit will be within reach for foundations and even school districts. With frequent, regular flights to space, citizen astronauts will be teachers and mentors to countless pupils, inspiring the next generation of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics students. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony for this hearing, and I look forward to working with you, all of you and your staff as the Commercial Spaceflight Federation promotes the development of this promising American industry, pursues ever higher levels of safety, and shares best practices and expertise throughout the industry.
Thank you all. This is very good. This is an important time for us to have this hearing because we are in the state of change from a reliable system of the space shuttle, now bringing in commercial, but in parallel, continuing NASA's mission of exploring the heavens, of getting outside of low Earth orbit. And it's all coming into the consciousness of the American people. The success of SpaceX, as we already mentioned, and on July the 2nd, the first piece of flight hardware for the big rocket arrives. And it will be arriving at the Kennedy Space Center and will be assembled, and its first test flight will occur in 2014. And, of course, this is the NASA's program that they refer to as the Space Launch System, with the capsule being dubbed Orion. So this is a very important time that we get it right, and that the success that we've had thus far is quite promising. I'm going to ask just a couple of questions and turn it over to my colleagues, and I'll wrap up. But Mr. Gerstenmaier, since you all rotate 3 astronauts to and from the station every 6 months, most of these commercial vehicles are designed to hold 7 people. So how many commercial crew flights per year is NASA planning to buy, and how many seats will NASA make use of on each flight? And then I want to talk to you about how much cost savings that you're looking for that we are going to achieve per seat over and above what we currently pay to the Russians on Soyuz.
In terms of flights to ISS, we're anticipating staying with the rotation period of about 180 days as we've had. So that would be about 2 flights per year. We would definitely increase the crew size on ISS to 7 crew members. We currently have 6 crew members on ISS. We would add 1 more. Space Station was designed to operate at a full complement of crew of 7. We think that'll increase the research capability on board station, allow us to do more national lab research and be more effective in utilizing Space Station. So we will definitely use 4 seats from the commercial providers. In terms of the other seats, we're still off investigating what makes sense. Would it be better to carry some cargo in those seats? Would it be better to carry crew, other participants? Could we do other things with those? We're still off investigating what the right mix is. We're also exploring a little bit what the right duration is. We may do some extended missions on board Space Station on the order of a year or so, and that's to gain some experience with the kind of durations we may need in space for Mars-type missions. So we're still off looking at those exact numbers, but I would say we're on the order of about 2 flights per year with a confirmed 4 seats on those flights, and then we're looking at how we could use those other seats effectively. In terms of prices, you know, we're still working that through the commercial crew program. We'll see what the commercial providers come in at. We've budgeted the seat price at roughly what we pay for the Soyuz activity. That's just a budgeting number. That is not what we expect the seats to cost. We expect there to be a cost reduction, but I think it's a little too early for us to pick a particular value for that cost reduction.
In light of Mr. Gold's experience of going and finding a much cheaper rocket, do you expect those costs to come down considerably? In his case, it was cargo. In your case, we're asking the question about crew.
Again, I believe the prices will be cheaper than what we will have to pay for the Soyuz vehicle in terms of seat price. Exactly how much that is a function of the design, the ops concept, and all the work that comes in front of us. So, you know, we've got a lot of work in front of us. You know, we put our safety requirements out for the commercial providers to go look at. We're in the middle of this commercial crew capabilities activity where we're going to go under the next phase of SpaceX with some providers to move forward. And until we really get a chance to see what those numbers are, it's tough to speculate exactly what that delta will be, but I expect it to be less expensive than Soyuz.
Under what appears to be going to be the number coming out of the NASA appropriations bill for commercial crew, $525 million, with a down select to 2.5 competitors. When do you think that with $525 million, what is the realistic time that we will first launch crew? Is it 2016?
What we've done is in the President's budget, which we've submitted to you, where we show essentially a higher number in 13, but say if we just had the 525 in 13, and then we had an increase in the following years in 2014, 15, 16, 17. If we get that increase similar to what the President had requested and what we've requested in our submit to you, if we get those kind of levels, we think we have crew available in the 2017 timeframe. Some of our providers think they can deliver crew earlier than 2017. We've heard estimates as early as potentially 2015. But from a NASA perspective, we kind of have to protect for the worst case, so we want to make sure that we've looked at the outer bounds of that. So if there's schedule delays or problems that have occurred, which are routine in our business, as you can see, even with cargo, some of the flights are a little later than the commercial companies had projected. But we're protecting for that 2017 date with the hopes that the commercial providers can do better than that and deliver earlier than the 2017. But we'll need funding on the level of what we've asked for in the President's request.
It is true that some of the competitors are saying that they could go earlier, whether it's 2015 or 2017, and being able to deliver 7 crew members. Then I think the obvious thing is that you get around to 2020 and the space station is not going to be deactivated. Before I turn it over to Senator Hutchison, would you just reaffirm for everyone that they understand some of the magnitude of the experiments that are going on the space station, such as a vaccine for salmonella that's in its final FDA trials here on Earth that was developed on board the properties of near zero G on the station, and a vaccine for MRSA that is in its first stages of FDA trials here on Earth. Would you confirm or expand on that?
One of the unique properties we see in space is that viruses and bacteria mutate into a variety of forms in space, and we're not exactly sure why that occurs. We have some researchers that are looking at that phenomena, why it occurs. But the industry is potentially able to take advantage of that because you get a variety of salmonella that can then be returned to the Earth. They can then look at that, determine which genes get turned on, and then essentially modify that salmonella such that it's strong enough to cause an immune reaction in the human system but not actually give you the disease. So therefore, you're able to create a vaccine in a much shorter amount of time than you could ever in ground-based research because you take advantage of the fact that you end up with a whole variety of virus and bacteria. It also, as you discussed earlier, it also can apply to MRSA, to other things, to influenza viruses, et cetera. So this offers a potential avenue of a way to get better pharmaceutical or better drug productions for us in general. So it's much like when we went to Africa to look for new plant species and things to create new drugs. We're now using the unique properties that these viruses and bacteria do in space to essentially create a new industry. There's also areas in materials, combustion, other areas that have the same promise. And our intent is to try to expose commercial industry to these properties, let them understand for their individual industries what the benefits of space-based research are. Then this essentially creates potentially a new economy based on space-based research. We could have dramatic impacts. And that's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do as Station over these next several years.
And I bring that attention to that subject because many people have missed that very good piece of news of what is happening on board the space station where 6 humans are right now. And it's timely that you spoke of that, Mr. Gerstenmaier, because when we adjourn this hearing to go vote at 11:30, this very same topic is a topic of discussion with 2 astronauts that have been on the space station, and this will occur in the Rayburn foyer at 11:30 this morning. Senator Hutchison, I want to turn to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly appreciate that your continued interest. And Senator Boozman, I have to say, you have stepped up to the plate and done your homework, and I appreciate so much the good job you're doing as ranking member.
And I just want to say, so that everybody understands how much we're going to miss Senator Hutchison, She is the reason that there is a designated national laboratory on the space station, and she has been consistently the promoter of the International Space Station. And the next hearing that we have in this subcommittee will be on that subject. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And let me say that I was very excited, as I know everyone was, with the SpaceX, the Dragon success. That just is a wonderful milestone to get equipment and payload to the space station and dock is wonderful. And what I would have said in my opening statement, which I will put in the record, but we are paying a heavy price for the Russian Soyuz space. And the reason that we're paying hundreds of millions of dollars, and it will be in the billions before we're finished, is because we were not able to fund adequately to close the gap for a commercial crew vehicle following on to the shuttle retirement. We knew it was coming. Senator Nelson and I worked in every way. We've worked with 3 administrations, and we've never had the adequate support to plan ahead and not have the gap that is here. I don't want that to happen again as we are looking forward, which NASA, as our space exploration agency, should be doing. But we know what the next mission is going to be. We don't know what we're going to be finding, just like we didn't know when we went to the moon what we would find exactly and what we would gain from it. And the gains have been enormous, which we know. But now we know that we've got to utilize the space station. We believe that commercial is the way to do it in an efficient way, to put people there to do the experiments, and the space station will be our major focus for till the year 2020. But we know that after that, the next horizon is beyond low Earth orbit. And what Senator Nelson and I have tried to do, and Senator Boozman has been so helpful, is to assure that we are not shortchanging the future by only focusing on the present and having the same thing happen where kids start saying, well, gosh, why are we giving up space exploration in 2020? Because everything's shut down because we didn't look to the future. So here's my question, Mr. Gerstenmaier. You are the one that I think does have a vision for what we can and must do for the future beyond low Earth orbit. Can we be assured going forward that the allocations for NASA will adequately fund the crew vehicle to use the space station, and hopefully I can't wait to find out what the alpha magnetic spectrometer might bring us, having seen the hits myself at Johnson Space Center. Can we, though, be assured that NASA will fully fund the commercial crew vehicle and the commercial efforts up to that time, and also continue the progress so that in 2020, well, before 2020, but when 2020, when the space station will go away, most likely, that we will have a fully ready to go heavy launch vehicle with a capsule on it for astronauts that will have a mission ready, so that we aren't going to see what happened honestly this year, and it was that they took the exact amount out of heavy launch and put it into commercial. Now, we rebalanced. We are going to fully fund commercial, and with the down select to 2, we will do that. And I know Congress, with the leadership of Senator Boozman and Senator Nelson going forward, and the other people who are going to be coming into Congress are going to want to do the same thing. Will NASA do that kind of budgeting going forward rather than this constant pull as if there's a competition between the present and the future? Mr. Gerstenmaier.
You know, I'm responsible for human spaceflight, and what I mean by human spaceflight is it's both. It's the commercial aspect, and it's also the vehicles that go beyond low Earth orbit, the Orion and the heavy lift launch vehicle. And within the tight budget constraints, it's my job to balance those, that we deliver both programs in a timely manner that best serve what we need as a nation. And we're working really hard to go do that. As Senator Nelson talked about earlier, you know, the final weld is occurring today on the Orion test capsule that'll be used in 2014 to go be the first vehicle to return at 80% of the lunar velocity into the atmosphere to make sure that works. That's going to get delivered to Florida on July 2nd, as he talked about. That final weld is actually occurring in New Orleans today, and the teams are being careful with that weld, and if they need to take a little extra time, they may, and we may have to do something with July 2nd, but we'll do the right thing overall. But the teams are really focused and moving forward. We just completed a systems design review for the heavy lift launch vehicle. We're starting to lay out the plans to get that work done. We're going to test that vehicle down at Stennis in December of 2016 in support of its first flight in 2017. We now, for the first time, have detailed schedules laid out. We know when the first drawings for that heavy lift launch vehicle need to be delivered, and those drawings start being released in August of this year. So we have real concrete plans to keep moving the Orion forward, move the SLS forward, and with your help for funding, we'll keep all these programs moving forward as well as Commercial Crew. And it's not about one or the other, as you very accurately described. Human spaceflight is about all of these, and we need to work as a team to pull this off to make this happen so we can continue to be a leader in space and continue to be where we are. So we treat it just as you described. This is a package. There's a role for commercial spaceflight in low Earth orbit. There's a role for us beyond low Earth orbit. We need to find that balance to move those forward to keep human spaceflight in this nation strong.
Well, thank you. That's a wonderful answer, and I just hope that there will no longer be budget proposals from the president, whoever that will be next year, that will appear to cut back on the future and fund the present, because we have an authorization bill that assures both. We support both. I'm going to see the SpaceX operation in Texas in July. I'm very excited about it. I don't want to see next year another instance of what we saw this year, Mr. Gerstenmaier, and I just hope that we can see that commitment on the part of NASA and the President's OMB. And believe me, I didn't like what OMB did in the last administration or the one before that either, so I'm equal in my disappointment in this commitment, but since you're here now, I do hope that you will assure that the budget that comes from the President's office will reflect what you and I have both said is our goal, and I know that the two senators here agree. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks to you and Senator Mikulski and Congressman Wolf and Congressman Fattah, you all have basically kept NASA's appropriations level while every other agency is feeling the effects of the increased austerity that we have been facing as a result of the budgetary problems. So again, we thank you, Senator Hutchison. Senator Boozman.
Thank you. And again, I just want to echo that's such good advice, and it's just difficult in these tough fiscal times. The statement about don't shortchange the future, as you focus on the present. And again, you two have worked so hard to make sure in this particular case that that has not been done, and that's been a real challenge. Let me ask, I want to ask something that I'd like to get y'all's opinion on real quick, and I think this is important. While the U.S. cooperative programs with Russia were expanding in the 1900s, including Russia joining the Space Station International Partnership in 1993, it also became clear that Russia was a source of sensitive technology to Iran. The Iran Non-Proliferation Act of 2000 was enacted to help stop foreign transfers to Iran of weapons of mass destruction, missile technology, and advanced conventional weapons technology, particularly from Russia. One of the things that that act did was to ban payments by any agency of the U.S. government to Russian government agencies for work on the International Space Station. This provision has raised difficulties regarding U.S. access to the space station. In 2005, Congress amended the act to exempt Soyuz flights to the space station from the ban through 2011, and in 2008 the exception was further extended through June of 2016. It's been said that without further extension of this exception, the current restrictions will severely limit the U.S. from sustaining and fully utilizing the space station. The United States would have no means of transporting our astronauts to and from the space station. And equally important, relief is needed to clearly enable NASA partnerships with some U.S. commercial partners for space station crew and cargo services that utilize Russian space technologies. So with the planned extension of the space station operations till at least 2020, it seems that an extension beyond 2016 is needed. So can you comment on that and just kind of clarify your thoughts and, you know, where you think we need to go in that regard? Start with you, Mr. Gerstenmaier.
As I've previously testified here, I think we will likely require some exceptions to the North Korea Syria Non-Proliferation Act, as you described. We need that for a variety of activities. We do basic engineering with this space station, other activities of which we have to pay for, or we even barter for services, and we will likely need some relief for that restriction that sits in front of us.
And what would be the consequence if we didn't get the relief?
We would still have to work with our partners. The way we understand the restriction is it also doesn't allow us to barter. I think it says for goods as well as funding. So we barter for a lot of engineering analysis and other things. We would not be able to have the support that we need to operate the space station without some relief to that act. And we'll still continue to work with our Russian partners. Maybe they would donate that engineering service and that research service without bartering for it. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that really, it goes back to, I think, some earlier testimonies that was given down here. The commercial folks really need some certainty of where they're going and to be forward, and to sit there with this uncertain thing going forward, I think potentially impacts the ability for us to use ISS in the most effective manner.
So the uncertainty is as much a problem as anything.
Yes, because I think we could debate whether we could work around this in some way. There may be a way legally to get through it. It'll take us a significant amount of time to do that, and while we're going through that period, there's a fair amount of uncertainty with that. But they might be better able to address it from their perspective than tonight.
Ms. Melroy.
Thank you, Senator. We have been informed of the same things that Mr. Gerstenmaier has said from industry, has also told us the same things, and we support our NASA colleagues in this.
Dr. Dillingham.
That issue is something that we haven't looked at this point in time.
Okay. Mr. Gold.
Our company has, of course, conducted extensive operations in Russia, and if I could just add some fire to the fuel of your concerns, I think we also have a broken export control reform regime. Mr. Gerstenmaier correctly points out uncertainties. We never knew what to expect relative to technology that we could share or could not share. The system is obsolete, second only to ITAR. You know, gravity was the greatest potential to keep us from launching, and we need to get reform language into the National Defense Authorization to take care of this issue so we can protect our technology in a better fashion.
Yes, sir.
Senator, it's clear that we're quite interested in providing commercial crew services to the ISS, and therefore we sort of need the ISS to be there for us. So it appears that the current legal thinking is that some relief will be required for NASA to be able to pursue the agreements that they have, excluding perhaps the Russian Soyuz, or even not thinking about the Soyuz situation. There are some other things that are important for the survival of the ISS. So even leaving that part out of the equation, we support whatever is necessary to ensure future use of the space station.
Very good. Dr. Dillingham, as the, I think Mr. Gold referred to you as kind of the final authority on some of these things. Tell us about, can you update us on the status? You know, we've been talking about indemnification. I think, you know, the first two witnesses, I think everybody on the panel has mentioned that. You have had some recommendations to the FAA regarding the process. Can you give me a further update on what's happening with your recommendations?
Yes, Senator. We looked at the insurance regime, and one of the things, as we talked to many people in the industry, the launchers, the launch providers, and FAA, it was clear that the third-party indemnification is very important for the industry to, mature and move on in that area. One of the things that we had discussions with FAA about was the maximum probable loss calculations and the way that is currently done by FAA, because it has an effect on the potential liability for the federal government. If it's one way, it could be more liability for the federal government. If it's done another way or done incorrectly, in any case, it could be less, more or less. And FAA agrees that their maximum probable liability calculations is rather dated, and they also agree that it is something that they would like to update to more modern techniques so that they could be more definitive in the insurance and the risks that the government would be exposed to. And they also, of course, indicate that, it's not going to be free to do that. So the indemnification regime is important. However, that part of it, we think is something that needs to be relooked at after all of these years.
Should we extend it before your recommendations are put into effect?
I think so. I mean, we didn't talk to anyone in the industry who would say that this is something that shouldn't be extended. Indemnification is present in all of our competitors around the world. You've heard the captain say this morning, and we heard it several times in our work, that in terms of competition, without that, it could have a potentially negative impact on our ability in a competitive way, raise the cost of launches, and send business across the water. Also impact on our national defense as well, our industrial base. So yes, it's very important. We didn't get any strong, sense that it should not be extended.
Okay. So we should extend, but this would be a good time to clean it up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Just a passing comment on that indemnification. For the commercial companies, and this started way back in the 80s when we were first trying to get some commercial activity, companies have to know what they can buy insurance for. And if they know that, given the fact that there's always a possibility, albeit remote, that you could have a catastrophic event on a urban population, extremely remote with all the safety that is put into the launching, but if they know that they have to buy insurance to protect them, for catastrophic insurance up to $1.5 billion, and that the government is going to indemnify them on any catastrophic thing above $1.5 billion, then that's a cost of doing business that commercial companies can figure into their overall cost. And that's why we simply got to continue this. I want to get back to you, Mr. Gerstenmaier. NASA did a contract for cargo resupply way back in 2008, long before anyone had demonstrated the capability. This is in the previous administration, so it has nothing to do with the orientation of any particular administration. And now, having spent $800 million in the demonstration flights for cargo, NASA has paid almost $1 billion under the ISS cargo resupply contract, even though we haven't actually had the official start of the contract. And that would come later, presumably this year, with another SpaceX launch, successfully delivering cargo. And Orbital Sciences doesn't even yet have a working launch pad. So why is the government making these payments, and what is the services that NASA has received?
This is pretty typical of most of our launch contracts, even for our expendable launch vehicles. If you look at the payment schedule, after we give authority to proceed to a contractor, generally the payments occur with certain milestones. For example, when hardware is ready at some state and to move forward, et cetera. So our commercial resupply services contracts are the same way. There are certain milestones, certain design reviews, certain activities that occur for preparation of which they are paid. And then and it turns out the majority of the funding is actually paid before the actual launch occurs. And then when the launch occurs, the final payment is typically occurs. That's typical throughout our industry, and that's the way we've done things. That's the way the CRS contracts are started and the way they're structured. So we've gotten positive work on these. If you go look at Orbital, for example, you can see what work is actually down there. They have several launch vehicles ready. They have a fleet of engines ready to go supply and support. They have their Cygnus capsule on board and are down in Wallops ready to get launched. It's been through thermal vacuum testing. They've done a significant amount of work building a control center in Reston to monitor that activity, so they have spent those funds in essentially preparing for this activity to deliver cargo. The unfortunate thing in our business is it takes a long time for us to get ready. So we really have to start with these kind of lead times, typically 3 to 4 years, to do earnest work before we are ready to actually go deliver the activity or the service we want out the other side. We started the CRS contracts when we did because we knew the shuttle was going to retire in the 2010 timeframe at that point. And if we were going to be able to keep Space Station resupplied and realize the vision of Space Station of doing this research, we had to get moving. Even though it was an uncertain environment, we had to take some risk and move forward with these providers and lay out a reasonable plan to go forward, and that's what we did in 2008. And I think if you look at their state of readiness, it's a little bit later than we had anticipated, but they've delivered the hardware, they've delivered the services, they're poised to deliver the cargo just like we had anticipated when we issued those contracts back in 2008.
That's a very complete answer, and congratulations on your progress to this point. Mr. Gold, I wanted to ask you about your business plan. Do you have a business plan going forward that the launch services are going to be what the Russians have charged you on the basis of what you already have in orbit? And of course, what we've seen is the delivery of different crew going up. We've seen it from 20 million per passenger several years ago to over 60 million per passenger now. So what is your business plan to put crew on your larger vehicle of getting them up there?
Next to NASA, and probably equal to NASA, I would say, we are extraordinarily dependent on the success of the Commercial Crew program. It's why we're here today. It's why we care. I can assure you that if we are forced to abide by the pricing that currently exists, our business plan, and frankly any business plan, would be unsustainable. Those prices must come down from the $60+ million range. They must come down dramatically for there to be a business case from the private sector end. However, if you don't mind, Senator, I'd also like to mention that we should not limit our view on pricing alone. Per my opening testimony, there are substantial regulatory issues that are as important as pricing. As Ranking Member Boozman pointed out, there are the export control issues, and if I could share a quick anecdote on that. When I first traveled to Moscow, it was myself and a handful of our engineers, and across the aisle from us were a dozen card-carrying members of the Communist Party. Yet it was not them, but me, as an American, who traveled with not one, but 2 government monitors breathing down my neck, telling me, every word that I could or could not say. And I was paying them to the tune of $140 per hour per monitor, plus room and board, plus all of their travel. We paid over $300,000 to $400,000 in direct costs to the government, probably about $1 million in ITAR compliance overall. I would joke with the Russians that the KGB may have spied on you back in the day, but at least they had the good courtesy to do it for free. And I wouldn't be so upset if we were actually protecting anything. Again, Ranking Member Boozman's comments, there are definitely some technologies that we have to be very careful of. But again, to give you an example, we had a stand. And the purpose of this stand was to keep our spacecraft off of the ground. It was round, 4 legs coming out. If you put some silverware on top of it, indistinguishable from a metal coffee table. I had to have 2 security guards watching that coffee table full time, plus paying 2 government monitors to watch the coffee table. Now, I can only imagine the national security implications of this coffee technology leaking out to the Russians, which could then go to the Iranians, where they could serve coffee or even tea on. So beyond pricing, there are some significant regulatory issues that have to be dealt with in order for a true commercial business case to come to fruition.
Of course, but I can tell you that because we weren't minding the store back in the 1980s, and we started allowing American satellites to be launched on the Chinese launch vehicle, the Long March, significant American technology was transferred, and it wasn't supposed to be. And so clearly when you come to the national security interests, you do have interests, and you got to pay attention to them. And the Chinese are successful today in part because they got a lot of our technology that was supposed to be kept from them, even though a number of those aerospace companies insisted that they be able to sell their very sophisticated satellites for a Chinese launch vehicle. So there's a balance that you have to achieve here. Well, if you get yourself around the regulatory, and by the way, this INCSTA, we don't have any choice. We have to pass that because we simply can't let that get in the way of us moving ahead with the space program. Not counting NASA, what do you think? How many people in the private sector are willing to pay how much to fly up to your vehicle?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me first say when it comes to people, and if I could get rid of some misperceptions relative to Bigelow Aerospace, I've been told that we're building a space hotel. I've even been told that we're building a space casino. And I can tell you neither is the case. This is what happens when you come from Las Vegas. Our business case is based upon a model that isn't overly different than the ISS. where you will have countries on one end of the spectrum, take Japan, for example, that has a robust human spaceflight program, but per all the budget problems they're having, would like to get more seats and more capability for less money. Then on the other hand, take a country like Singapore, which has never had a human spaceflight program before and would like to do so, particularly if they could get through it without breaking the bank. That is really where we're going, plus the excellent point that you raised, microgravity research and development. I really believe we are grossly underestimating the impact of that on our overall economy, and particularly at first in pharma and biotech. You mentioned some of the good vaccine research that's going on. That's just scratching the surface. We've had conversations with Johns Hopkins about cancer research that could just be a game changer, quite frankly. But we have to develop regular, robust, and reliable access to space to bring that to fruition. The microgravity revolution will happen in pharma and in other sectors. The question is, will it happen in America or will it happen in China?
Would you give the committee just a glimpse of some of that additional microgravity research that you think is very promising?
Certainly, sir. I am a lawyer, not a biologist, so if you'll forgive any inaccuracies. But, for example, and this is the conversation we were having with Johns Hopkins, when you're developing a cancer drug in a 2D terrestrial gravity sense, you can spend hundreds of millions of dollars and years only to find out that the drug doesn't work, it makes your hair fall out, you grow a third arm, it's bad. There will also be drugs that could have been significant benefits to human health and in terms of economy that were dropped because of false negatives. When you get into the microgravity environment, it basically simulates the human body, which is a matrices, in a fashion that can't be done terrestrially. And then you can get real results in terms of what drugs will work and what drugs won't work. And that will save the pharmaceutical companies hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in terms of just the data as to what drug to bet on moving forward. I think we've already seen some examples of this on the ISS with Amgen that did studies relative to muscular dystrophy, osteoporosis drugs, actually, I believe it was, where they were able to determine what the right drug was to invest their money in. You know, forget Las Vegas. Pharmaceuticals is a big gamble. And if you can provide that extra information, that's something that every pharmaceutical company is going to need.
I think the American people are suddenly going to fixate on that once we see come out of the FDA trials the first major vaccine that is going to have a profound effect here on Earth as a result of the research that occurred in the properties of near zero G on the station. Anybody else want to comment on any of this? Okay, then let me ask Colonel, how does the, let's pick up on this regulatory thing. And the FAA is going to be involved in that. How does the prohibition on regulation hamper your ability to discuss, plan, and propose future safety regulations for spaceflight passengers and crew?
Well, Senator, protection of humans in space, especially when you are not specifically looking at a single mission, but instead covering a broad array of vehicle types and uses, will be a major undertaking. Therefore, we would like to have an extended discussion that's very specific with industry about making sure that we're not stifling innovation. At the same time, we're trying to avoid risks that we know about. Under the Administrative Procedures Act, we have some restrictions on the way that we can discuss potential regulations until we're in a rulemaking. And at this time, we cannot propose regulations. Therefore, we have to keep our conversation very general and on overarching topics. But we will work with that. We're working with our industry advisory group, ComStack, and plan to work within the constraints of the law.
just for a second. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask you, Mr. Gerstenmaier, under the new agreement for a limited number of commercial partners under the Space Act agreements, how will NASA ensure that its safety standards and human rating requirements will be met by the vehicles being developed?
We've approached that several ways. We've published all our safety requirements now, which are available to industry to take a look at. They're in a series of documents that sit out there. So this is different than we've done before. We've actually got all those requirements out there so industry can see those and can start implementing and designing to those requirements. We're starting to work or think about now what our right strategy is, how we move forward. We're going to do Space Act for this next phase, and then we want to go into a commercial contract, a FAR-based contract activity for the actual certification and demonstration phase. We're in the process now of discussing internal to the agency exactly how we do that flow and how we do that movement into that larger certification contract. In there will be some phase-in period or some kind of phase-in contract where we'll be able to actually work and ensure that we have the right insight and the right oversight to work directly for these unique safety requirements. But we're going to, again, try to limit our interface and interaction to really just the safety requirements, the things that we determine we've determined throughout the years are really critical to protecting crew safety. So we're still in the process of that. In the next several months or so, or next several weeks or so, we'll be able to discuss with you in more detail exactly some more specifics of how that strategy lays out. And, but we definitely are thinking about that. But the big advantage now is the contractors can see our requirements. They know exactly what we expect from a human safety standpoint, and that's a big plus for them as they move forward.
Yeah, that really does seem to be a key, you know, in the sense that it's got to be done right. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts, and yet hopefully we can figure out a way, you know, to ensure safety without, you know, and do it where it's as cost efficient, you know, as possible, because that's going to be a real key to whether or not it's viable going forward. I do want to congratulate SpaceX for their very successful mission. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Gold and Captain Lopez, having some assurance of the safety by NASA with their regulations, I assume, is going to be extremely important to you for your customers. You want to make a comment?
It's extremely important. And again, we need the commercial crew program to go well and produce an affordable, safe product. And frankly, we shared many of the concerns of Congressman Wolf in regard to ensuring that we have a FAR-based procurement that is being developed in parallel to the SAA-driven activity, so that when that SAA activity finishes, there can be a clean handoff from the SAA development to the procurement phase, just like we've done with COTS and CRS. Additionally, per my opening testimony, we believe that Mr. Gerstenmaier's hands should be untied relative to providing mandatory safety requirements even under the context of a Space Act agreement, particularly if the future crewed options are to be triggered under the current CCI cap. We disagree with NASA legal's assessment that he can't do that. We think that he can, and again would urge the committee to go to the GAO for additional insight into that issue.
Captain?
Senator, I would say that I think the approach that Mr. Gerstenmaier outlined is an appropriate one, in that NASA is hands-off during the design development of test of these vehicles to assure the most rapid decision-making and basically get to a critical design stage as soon as possible, but that they should have oversight when it comes to safety. Now, which form that oversight takes place, if it has to be a FAR-type contract or if it can be a Space Act agreement, that's sort of beyond my purview, as I am not an attorney like Mr. Gold, but I think the principle that NASA has a final say-so on safety is key.
I've got one more question. Okay, final question, Mr. Gerstenmaier. Since NASA science launches are not licensed by the FAA, does that mean there is no government indemnification for these launches?
I'll have to take that for the record and go look at that. I believe that under our NOS contract, those are FAA licensed. Pam, can you help me?
I believe there's one that has been licensed and falls under the CSLA indemnification regime. And I am not an expert, but I do understand that there is a separate indemnification process for missions that are executed by and for NASA.
Okay, if you all will check that and let us know. And then are we to assume that there is the normal indemnification when you all get into the big rocket, the SLS and Orion?
Yes, that will be the standard thing we have done in the past for the shuttle program, et cetera. And we still have yet to, we'll work out the details associated with that, but it'll be similar to what we've done with previous manned programs like the shuttle and other aspects.
I want to thank the witnesses for being especially very much to the point and mindful of the time. And we have even made it to the finish line with 10 minutes to spare when the votes are being called. Thank you all. Have a good day. The meeting is adjourned.